Welcome to the Department of State Smart Growth Community Planning and Zoning Program Training. My name is Stefan Lutter, and I'm a revitalization specialist with Department of State, joined by my colleague today, Danny Lappin. Today, we will give an introductory overview of the 10 principles that will need to be integrated into your Smart Growth Community Planning and Zoning grant, and how doing so can strengthen your community. The Department of State Smart Growth Program currently offers funding for comprehensive plans, zoning codes, area plans, and zoning regulations that implement an area plan. These activities are foundational planning work for any community and build upon each other. Whether a plan or zoning update, projects must convincingly incorporate all smart growth principles. In addition to the Smart Growth Community Planning and Zoning Program, DOS's smart growth principles are deeply integrated across other programs, including the Downtown Revitalization Initiative and New York Forward programs, the Brownfield Opportunity Area or BOA program, and the Local Waterfront Revitalization Program or LWRP. A comprehensive plan establishes a collective vision and goals for the growth of a community. These plans typically address a wide range of planning issues like economic development, housing, transportation, and natural resources, to name a few. Comprehensive plans offer a blueprint for community decision-making and provide the legal basis for zoning regulations and guide local decision-making. An area plan complements an existing comprehensive plan by providing supplemental guidance for growth in a defined area, such as a downtown or particular neighborhood. Area plans often result in the development of zoning updates implementing the needs articulated in the plan. Both comprehensive plans and area plans are written with the support of the community through community engagement strategies that identify issues, brainstorm solutions, and create a vision for the future. A zoning code organizes and regulates how land is used. Zoning codes should be created through a community-driven planning process. Zoning codes must be consistent with an adopted comprehensive plan. These are traditional planning activities. However, under our program, all activities must comprehensively address the smart growth principles. Before we get into the smart growth principles, it's worth touching on what smart growth isn't. There are many common terms that could be used to paint a broad picture, like sprawl or strip development, for instance. Generally, though, poorly planned communities are ones that look like everywhere else, focus almost exclusively on automobile transportation, and sacrifice open space to large plot single-family or commercial strip development. This type of planning can undermine existing neighborhoods, put municipal finances at risk, and have massive environmental and social costs, as well as being economically underproductive. But what is smart growth? Smart growth is a planning concept that utilizes a set of guiding principles incorporated into planning and decision-making processes that promote livable, sustainable, and equitable communities. Smart growth communities capture growth in a way that strengthens and improves their existing communities rather than undermining them. Smart growth communities provide choices for residents, from a variety of housing types to being able to walk or take a bike somewhere they need to go. They prioritize green space and accessible and active public spaces. And partly due to all of this, they have strong identities and unique character. We'll go through each principle today and provide examples of how these principles are being put into action to improve communities around New York State and beyond. The examples provided today are by no means an exhaustive list of recommendations, but rather should act as a starting point for thinking about your community's planning process. As you listen to these examples, consider how you might incorporate smart growth into your community's comprehensive plan or zoning code. Consider the ways your community or communities elsewhere that you're familiar with might already begin to address some of these principles, or how an issue in your community might be addressed by one of these principles. Maybe you have areas that are unsafe for pedestrians, or maybe you have farmland in danger of being lost to development. You may realize that some of the best attributes of communities you're familiar with are strongly correlated with smart growth principles, intentionally or not. These images are illustrative of places throughout New York State that have already begun to incorporate smart growth principles into their communities. It's important to note that smart growth principles are relevant everywhere, urban, suburban, or rural places. The examples provided today range from big cities to small towns. A park project, placemaking effort, or housing strategy might not look the same implemented in a small hamlet as it does in a bigger city, but most of the techniques and best practices are still relevant and adaptable. Just as it's helpful to increase density in a city to support vibrant mixed-use neighborhoods, it's helpful to capture housing growth in small villages to boost the viability of Main Street businesses while preserving nearby open space and agricultural resources. It's not too late or too early to start incorporating smart growth into your planning and decision-making processes. And while the principles are universal, the details should be adapted creatively and ambitiously to your local community. So when we provide examples, don't focus too much on where they're happening and instead think about how the strategy might translate to your community. The principles are presented independently, but as you plan, you'll find many points of overlap. Indeed, the principles should be applied holistically and addressed across the board. They not only strengthen each other, but depend on one another to be successful. Principle number one is develop plans and land use regulations that allow for and encourage mixed use neighborhoods. Historically, our cities and towns developed in a pattern of mixed use neighborhoods or places where residential, commercial, and community uses are co located, allowing for residents to have easy access to necessities. Famous planner Jan Jacobs referred to the ballet of a good city sidewalk, a term coming from the steady stream of people who could readily walk to their place of work, patronize local businesses, attend school, and more. Mixed use neighborhoods improve mental and physical health by encouraging people to actively engage with their community on foot or bike, facilitating relationships with neighbors and shopkeepers. This ease of access fosters economic development, particularly of smaller businesses, and can strengthen a community's local tax base by promoting a strong locally based economy that's integrated into the structure of the community. In general, people are located closer to their needs, reducing reliance on their car and associated environmental and financial costs. Here we see Water Street Market in downtown New Paltz, a pedestrian-centered market offering independent shops, outdoor seating, sculptures, and more. At a basic level, a comprehensive plan examines current conditions in a community and establishes a vision for its desired conditions 10 to 20 years in the future. This involves looking at historical and current land use patterns and how they might change going forward. To enable mixed neighborhoods, a community might consider how their land use regulations enable or restrict things like neighborhood businesses. The City of Kingston conducted a community survey in which 91% of respondents prioritized being able to walk to establishments that would meet their daily need. In response, the city adjusted its land use regulations to support the location of corner stores and neighborhood businesses in strategic locations throughout the community. Now, 89% of properties in the city are within a 10-minute walk of a local store. Comprehensive plans act as an efficient vehicle to contemplate ideal locations for further mixed-use development at a scale and intensity that strengthens existing neighborhoods. This can provide the basis for land use regulations that support efforts like those undertaken by the City of Kingston. From a use perspective, communities should support a broad range of uses by right rather than by special use permit, particularly uses that allow residents to meet their day-to-day needs and lower impact non-residential uses like retail, food service, daycares, community uses, or professional businesses. Communities can also enable mixed-use neighborhoods by reducing barriers to development, like parking minimums, that can often unnecessarily restrict development efforts in historic neighborhoods that were laid out prior to the invention of the automobile. Here we see a former garage or accessory building being repurposed into a neighborhood shop, integrated into the surrounding residential neighborhood. By reducing regulatory barriers to mixed-use development and focusing on form rather than use, communities can enable a diverse mix of uses at multiple scales, from mixed-use buildings to mixed-use streets and neighborhoods. Zoning codes can also facilitate good development by having a clear review process that outlines what will be looked at during, for example, site plan review. Such guidelines can ease the burden on developers and other applicants as well as the planning board by removing guesswork from the process and providing upfront expectations for all parties. The town of Geneva is a suburban and rural town of about 3,500 people bordering the city of Geneva. The example on the right shows a future land use map from the 2014 Town of Geneva Comprehensive Plan. The map focuses on an existing commercial area bordering the city of Geneva and recommends the enabling of a town center neighborhood area through zoning changes. The town center would enable redevelopment of existing commercial properties into mixed-use developments, which would provide housing adjacent to commercial uses and make the area more walkable with stronger connections to the city of Geneva and existing neighborhoods. This represents a strong example of a community using its comprehensive planning process to identify appropriate areas for mixed-use development and lay the groundwork for future zoning regulations to codify this new land use pattern that prioritizes a livable neighborhood over a single-use commercial district with strip-style commercial development. Additionally, the plan provided visual examples of what the town center could look like in practice. The example provides visualizations of the scale of development typical of a mixed-use neighborhood of the size and scope being imagined for the area, and outlines specific methods to ensure that future development will be attractive and enjoyable for all residents, specifically referencing architectural form, traffic mitigation, and pedestrian safety. The plan also suggests the use of a form-based code to ensure development is in character with the community vision.
The second smart growth principle focuses on enabling a diverse mix of housing types that provide opportunity and choice for all. Many communities across the state are experiencing increases in the cost of housing, with few options available for residents looking to move to or within a given area. And hence, housing choices can attract new residents and allow for existing residents to remain in their neighborhoods by moving to a more suitable home regardless of income, ability, age, or lifestyle. This all facilitates an overall improved local housing market where there are available and accessible homes of different types and price points. The images shown here are examples of different home types that fit into a smart growth context, from small lot single family homes and accessory dwelling units to multifamily units to row houses. During the comprehensive planning process, it is critical to conduct an objective assessment of your community's housing inventory, market, and underlying land use regulations or lack thereof. This can help identify potential programmatic and/or policy-based solutions that are responsive to the specific challenges and opportunities your community is facing. It is likely that a housing assessment will identify key areas where your community's residents might be struggling. These struggles could look like a young professional unable to find an affordable quality rental unit, or a new family looking to move to your community who cannot find a home to buy, or a senior struggling with a larger, older home who has no viable option to downsize and stay in their community. Comprehensive plans can help communities identify areas that would be appropriate for new construction or underutilized properties that are ripe for infill development. The example on the right highlights the Deet Street Lofts, a Round 1 downtown revitalization initiative project located on a former surface parking lot in the city of Oneonta. The Deet Street Lofts features 64 units of below market rate housing oriented toward artists, as well as the Hartwick College Baking Innovation Lab. Zoning codes can have a profound effect on the types and availability of housing within a community. Communities that incorporate the second smart growth principle typically allow a mix of missing middle housing types across and within neighborhoods, such as townhomes, multifamily, and mixed-use structures. Nuance is important here. We are not looking for communities to radically alter the built environment of their neighborhoods, nor are we looking for communities to nominally allow a wide range of housing types, but regulate them to the point where development is financially or practically infeasible. Rather, we are looking for zoning codes which establish the next highest increment of density in a given neighborhood, and for zoning regulations which streamlines review processes for new and infill housing developments. When developing or updating zoning codes, communities should consider accessibility, affordability, and proximity to needs and community resources when encouraging or facilitating housing in certain areas. Zoning codes can be adjusted to allow additional housing within existing neighborhoods by tweaking allowed uses and development standards, such as allowing accessory dwelling units or adjusting lot standards to be more flexible. The example on the right shows a visual representation of accessory dwelling units, or ADUs for short, from Burlington, Vermont. As you can see, ADUs can be designed in many different ways to increase density while minimizing visual changes to a neighborhood's character. The Village of Hamilton is a small community of about 4,000 people in Madison County, New York. This example is from the 2018 Village of Hamilton's Housing Report. In response to growing concerns about the increased cost of living, lack of housing availability, and the lack of housing types to enable residents to move into suitable housing within the village, the community conducted a comprehensive assessment of its housing market. While this document was not explicitly part of a comprehensive plan, this type of housing study would function well within a comp plan. The plan analyzed the village's housing market, set targets for new housing construction, and identified key areas in the village that could support new housing. The project consultant, CZB, identified 27.3 acres of land that could support between 139 and 274 new housing units, and recommended a series of changes to the village's zoning code to enable the construction of new housing.
For decades, building communities away from transportation hubs and job centers has caused unwanted effects like suburban sprawl and automobile dependency, resulting in ever rising traffic. In response, our third smart growth principle intends to prioritize the infill and redevelopment of existing buildings to revitalize neighborhoods and downtowns, including areas served by public transit. Infill development allows communities to take advantage of underutilized or abandoned structures to spur investment in surrounding properties while enhancing community character. Infill development can maintain the existing built environment while potentially increasing density. It can also increase local tax revenues without the added financial burden of infrastructure expansions. In the image to the right from Montgomery, New York, a village of about 3,500 people in Orange County, we see a 3-story white building. This is a new construction infill development and blends into the historic streetscape remarkably well. The village facilitated this by adopting historic design guidelines and having their downtown zoned to allow upper story residential. Comprehensive plans can be an excellent tool for encouraging infill development. Communities can use a comprehensive planning process to inventory underutilized properties that would be conducive to redevelopment. Public input can help communities identify desirable projects in line with current needs and future vision. And finally, communities can use their comprehensive planning process to identify funding streams that would enable infill development. The example on the right shows the Aurora Street Pocket neighborhood in Ithaca, New York. The project incorporated several housing units by combining a couple building additions with a few newly constructed buildings within a city block. It's an excellent demonstration of how to incorporate density into an existing neighborhood while complementing its character. Several zoning tools can encourage infill development and the redevelopment of existing structures. Smart growth zoning codes can reduce barriers around the physical orientation of buildings while being flexible on allowed uses to encourage the redevelopment of targeted sites. Additionally, removing typical barriers such as parking requirements can make the difference in a vacant lot being redeveloped into a thriving mixed-use structure in your community core. Zoning can also place an emphasis on the design of buildings to ensure that infill or adaptive reuse projects complement the character of existing neighborhoods. Infill and adaptive reuse does not necessarily need to be buildings. A pocket park, for instance, can enliven an entire downtown by giving people a quiet and sheltered place to sit and relax. Here we see Paley Park in New York City, a pocket park designed in the 60s where a nightclub used to stand. And this is Moyer Carriage Lofts, a recently completed redevelopment project in Syracuse. The project features 128 new mixed-income apartments and preserves and restores 4 historic buildings. The effort began nearly 10 years ago when the city pursued Brownfield Opportunity Area, or BOA, funding. The resulting Hiawatha Lodi Brownfield Opportunity Area plan identified this property as a strategic site, unlocking incentive opportunities that eventually contributed funding to enable the redevelopment. While not a comprehensive plan, the process would be similar. A comprehensive planning process might similarly identify strategic sites coupled with potential funding opportunities, or even identify a need for something like a BOA plan for a certain area to unlock further opportunities for challenged sites in need of redevelopment.
Our fourth principle is to provide well-planned, equitable, and accessible public spaces. Communities that embody this principle are designed to ensure that all residents are in relative proximity to a public space. Well-planned public spaces provide numerous community benefits. Studies have shown that parks increase surrounding property values, yield substantial physical and mental health benefits through recreational opportunities and relaxation, and provide numerous environmental benefits as well. The image to the right shows Lenox Skate Park, a public skate park located in Canastota, a village of about 4,500 people. Often, certain groups such as young adults or teens can be ignored when developing public spaces. Providing well-planned and equitable spaces means understanding community-wide needs and providing accommodating and responsive elements that make spaces usable and enjoyable by a wide range of community members. And comprehensive plans and zoning codes. This might involve documenting public spaces and how they are distributed across a community. Care should be given to note areas that are underserved, along with potential remedies for increasing public spaces or the quality of life with public spaces in such areas. How might you remedy the lack of public spaces? A planning process could identify underutilized spaces that could be improved to function as a community space. For instance, making use of a parking lot or creating a pocket park in an unassuming side yard. In addition to looking for new spaces, a planning process should seek to determine the strengths and shortcomings of existing spaces, and of course, all of this should be done with the consideration of both current and potential users of public spaces in a wide range of interests and abilities. Watkins Glen is a small village of about 1,800 people in Schuyler County and is home to Clute Park. Clute Park is an excellent example of a well-planned, accessible public space. The park was the beneficiary of an extensive strategic planning effort by a community group who saw the potential for a vibrant waterfront park on the shore of Seneca Lake. This strategic planning effort led to the village of Watkins Glen receiving a local waterfront revitalization program, or LWRP grant for short, that laid out the groundwork for a series of improvements to the park. The village was eventually awarded a Round 2 DRI funding to reinvigorate Clute Park. Over the course of the LWRP and the DRI planning processes, Watkins Glen hosted several design charrettes during which residents identified amenities like a year-round event center, bathhouse, winter rink, summer splash pad, and an ADA-compliant entrance and egress point.
Great neighborhoods often have unique defining characteristics like a popular coffee shop, music venue, or defined architecture. However, there are several design elements that are shared across successful neighborhoods throughout the state. These elements are enshrined in our fifth smart growth principle: encourage compact neighborhood design and concentrated development around existing infrastructure. Compact neighborhood design can increase social interaction, attract new residents and businesses, and spur innovation. Compact neighborhoods allow residents to walk and bike to meet their daily needs rather than rely on an automobile. From a financial perspective, compact neighborhood design increases the local tax base by locating physical improvements in a smaller footprint and minimizing the need for additional infrastructure. Compact neighborhoods can support economic development by increasing the number of people close to businesses and by fostering a sense of place and community identity that can drive support of local institutions. Concentrating development around existing infrastructure allows for the better management of municipal resources and protects sensitive natural resources and open space that might otherwise be consumed by development. Comprehensive plans and zoning codes can work in tandem to encourage compact neighborhood designs. Many communities across New York State were built before the advent of the automobile. These same communities often have zoning regulations that prevent the very same historic development patterns from being built. Comprehensive plans can identify changes to zoning codes that would resolve these discrepancies while maintaining and enhancing community character. Comprehensive plans can also identify strategic areas for adaptive reuse, like a surface parking lot, a vacant building, or a former light manufacturing facility that can supplement density in existing areas. Smart growth zoning codes can be designed to support historic densities at the neighborhood level through simple changes to allowable uses, parking requirements, lot setbacks, building massing, and other factors that often hamper compact design. Zoning codes can also contain design standards to ensure that historic buildings are preserved and that new development projects blend seamlessly into their surroundings by incorporating architectural elements that complement existing buildings. The City of Geneva's 2016 Comprehensive Plan paired nicely with a Round 1 DRI award. During the comprehensive planning process, the city identified a need to improve the city's housing stock in both quality and range of available options. Eventually, the Solar Village won the DRI award, leading to the construction of a new net zero compact neighborhood of 18 homes on the site of a former parking lot and vacant space. The community is walkable to downtown and the lakefront via pedestrian tunnel and increases tax revenue for the city on a previously underutilized site.
Our state's natural and agricultural resources are a critical life support system for our communities and the planet. In recent years, we have seen substantial disruptions in our food system due to major international issues. With climate change and impending extreme weather, we can only anticipate that the strain on our food system will increase, emphasizing the importance of farmland protection. At the same time, a growing need for housing in most of our state and outdated zoning codes and plans incentivize the use of open space and agricultural land to build new neighborhoods. Our sixth smart growth principle focuses on the preservation of open space, agricultural resources, and natural resources. Communities that incorporate this principle strive to achieve harmony between development and open space protection. In rural communities in particular, this can play a key role in maintaining community character. This principle, in effect, attempts to minimize the impacts of sprawl and ensure agricultural soils are available for future use, protect sensitive natural areas from development, ensure community access to open space, maintain scenic viewsheds, and of course, protect functional local agricultural economies. Comprehensive plans are a great tool for understanding how both the built and natural landscape has changed over time. Smart growth comprehensive plans can inventory agricultural land, open space, and natural resources like trout spawning streams, for example, and identify policies to protect these resources. They can attempt to articulate the importance and value of preservation of those resources to the local community. Comprehensive plans can also analyze programs at the local, state, and national level that could be leveraged to support natural resource protection efforts. The image on the right is from the town of Victor. As part of their comprehensive plan, the town investigated the uses and ownership status of active agricultural lands to better understand the state and needs of the farm community. Zoning can be used to enable agricultural economic development and protect sensitive natural areas from development. Communities can adjust zoning definitions to ensure their compatibility with the standards established by the New York State Department of Agriculture and Markets, or Ag and Markets for short. Communities can adjust code to ensure that agricultural uses and supporting operations such as veterinarians or farm equipment sales and repair are allowed and not hampered by review processes. Communities can direct development away from agricultural, open space, and natural resources through payment for development rights programs, overlay districts, establishment of specific zones for conservation, and allowing higher densities in already developed areas. Communities can utilize site plan review processes and articulate zoning districts that encourage more compact development in areas served by water and sewer infrastructure. To the right, we have sheep grazing under solar panels. There are certain circumstances where agriculture is compatible with other uses, but generally, development has eroded agricultural resources over the past decades by permanently transitioning farmland to another use, commonly single family residential, and thus undermining the local farm economy. The City of Kingston's open space plan articulates clear, measurable goals for open space enhancement, including the establishment of a new neighborhood, park, permanent protection of acreage, improved public access to the Hudson River, farmland protection, new urban gardens, and new and expanded trails, among others. Measurable targets, such as the ones provided here, set goals that allow a community to keep track of progress and strive toward a clear achievement of their planning vision.
Many municipalities throughout our state offer residents and visitors poor options for getting around, discouraging walking through poorly designed and maintained pedestrian networks, and stifling the spontaneous social gathering and spending that energize our communities. Our seventh smart growth principle challenges communities to envision streets as not just a road to move cars, but rather as a blank canvas for limitless interventions that can prioritize walking, biking, and public transportation, as well as other activity. Benefits to these interventions are quite tangible. Communities that de-emphasize automobile-based transportation often see reduction in their environmental and financial burden of cars on their neighborhoods, improved air quality and public health, activation of their streetscapes as productive community spaces, and more compact development patterns. Pedestrian-oriented enhancements can also improve basic safety and reduce likelihood of car-pedestrian conflicts. Often, children, elderly, and other non-drivers are the most affected by transportation patterns designed around automobiles, but everyone benefits when other transportation options are prioritized. The street on the right is in Jamestown, where their DRI took a street with an already high amount of area dedicated to pedestrians and added amenities such as trees, plantings, and decorative bricks to improve the overall appearance of the street and the pedestrian experience. In comprehensive plans, This might mean looking at the relationship between transportation systems and surrounding land uses, which can help determine where people need to go or where adding density could have the biggest impact on reducing reliance on personal automobiles. This can then inform how your community can address gaps in the non-automobile transportation network, such as missing sidewalks, points of conflict between pedestrians and cars, where a bus stop might be needed, and where car-oriented streets need to be redesigned to improve accessibility for others. It can also be helpful to examine the overall usability, connectivity, and safety of our community's existing pedestrian and bike infrastructure. This requires an honest approach that forms an understanding of where investments are needed to not enable but encourage non-automobile trips. As part of this, communities should also inventory and analyze existing car infrastructure such as parking lots, particularly in urban or town centers, and think about how these spaces could be better utilized. On the right, you'll see an excerpt from a Burlington, Vermont plan that explored how the dominant land uses interact with major thoroughfares and explored how to make transportation improvements in those areas in a coordinated strategy with land use regulations. Smart growth communities seek to provide compact, walkable neighborhoods connected to needs by transit or pedestrian infrastructure. Zoning can be a helpful tool in addressing this demand. Streetscape design standards can be used to prioritize non-motorized transit options. Increasing allowable uses and densities in neighborhoods can reduce automobile trips while boosting the viability of public transit. Eliminating or revising policies like minimum parking requirements can allow for more compact development pattern, which in turn makes walking and biking more attractive. Burlington, Vermont's plan set out a vision of a connected city, recognizing the interrelation between physical, social, economic, and environmental systems and how development patterns can affect the transportation in the community. The plan documents the transportation network before recommending that core services continue to be located along major thoroughfares and encourage quick treatment to rapidly respond to issues and improve mobility and access issues in the city. The city carefully coordinated an approach to transportation policy with its goals for future growth too. And finally, the city articulated clear goals to increase walking, biking, and public transportation.
The more our planet warms, the worse the impacts of climate change will be. Without rapid and deep reductions in global greenhouse gas emissions from human activities, the risks posed by sea level rise, extreme weather, and other harmful climate change impacts will increase substantially. Our eighth smart growth principle calls on communities to promote resiliency and adaptation while reducing greenhouse gas emissions. Undertaking these measures can help to mitigate the worst effects in your community. In doing so, your community can reduce the risk of property damage and loss and minimize recovery time in the face of extreme weather. Mitigation efforts dealing with issues such as heat waves and air quality can improve public health, and many resiliency strategies, particularly nature-based solutions, provide local environmental benefits such as improved water quality or overall emissions reductions through the use of renewable energy. Each community will likely implement this principle in a slightly different way. However, in a broad sense, communities typically improve their resilience to extreme weather by adopting land use policies and development practices which protects critical facilities from the effects of flood, drought, extreme heat, etc. Comprehensive plans are a great means to examine how climate change might affect your community. To start, it is important to inventory natural, built, and social resources to understand where your community might be vulnerable and or effective in addressing the effects of climate change. Public engagement activities can identify specific community experiences with climate impacts and extreme weather and prioritize early action steps and long-term strategies to respond to community conditions and anticipated impacts. This process might identify certain threats like extreme heat in areas with a low prevalence of reliable air conditioning, or certain populations or geographic areas that are at particular risk for impacts such as low-lying, flood-prone neighborhoods. More broadly, comprehensive plans can help current conditions regarding economic development, transportation, and housing or agriculture align with strategies to adapt to and mitigate the effects of climate change. As climate change continues to threaten our community with extreme weather events and sea level rise, innovative approaches to increasing resilience is critical to mitigate potential weather related damage and loss of property. Communities like Norfolk, Virginia have pioneered a term called climate informed zoning. Put simply, climate informed zoning is an approach to land use regulation which takes into account the effects of climate change. Examples of this could be ordinances surrounding riparian buffers. In Cary, North Carolina, the town established a requirement for development to be directed outside of the riparian zone of rivers, creeks, and streams. This limits the potential for flood related impacts to surrounding property and increases the ability of the landscape to absorb water and limit erosion. Communities can also amend zoning regulations around selective demolitions to enable communities recovering from a disaster to take down compromised structures after an extreme weather event. Communities can influence how water, especially during extreme rain events, moves through their community by limiting impervious coverage and prioritizing design standards adequately captures stormwater runoff. In response to the effects of Superstorm Sandy in 2012, the New York City Department of City Planning, or DCP for short, developed a series of temporary zoning regulations that were designed to help city residents recover from the impacts of the tragic weather event. At a basic level, the temporary regulations were intended to align the city's existing code with the risks posed by climate change and to streamline regulatory processes to enable faster disaster recovery times. More specifically, the Department of City Planning proposed to allow buildings to be constructed in a manner that was conscious of flooding risks posed by extreme weather events and sea level rise. Design standards for buildings supported measures to limit the effects of flooding on lower floors while still creating an attractive streetscape. Finally, reviews of partial building retrofits were streamlined provided they were intended to offset the risks of flooding. Additionally, zoning thresholds around the reuse of structures were relaxed to enable faster recovery times post disaster. Climate resiliency can be approached from many angles. For instance, a vision identified in New York's plan for a strong and just city identified climate resiliency for neighborhoods, economy, and public services and the effects of climate change. One of the results was a microgrant program and risk assessment assistant tool targeting small businesses. Small businesses often face deep challenges after an extreme weather event. For instance, an otherwise financially healthy cafe may close rather than face a months long recovery period.
At its core, our ninth smart growth principle recognizes that places are not just physical environments, but social and cultural ecosystems built upon interactions that happen throughout the community. Creative placemaking goes beyond traditional urban planning by placing people and their lived experience at the center of community development and building on unique community traits to create an attractive and welcoming community. Implementing this principle requires the nurturing and/or creation of a unique and memorable local culture that not only helps retain existing residents, but helps attract new residents and businesses. Building off a community's unique attributes can help foster and sustain local businesses by providing a competitive marketing advantage and contributing to an overall place with more people and activity. Community events and placemaking activities allow for people to build a genuine connection with their surroundings too. On the right, we see Blendorama, an annual 3-on-3 basketball tournament in Oneonta that takes place on the city's main street. The tournament draws competitors from a 100-mile radius and brings thousands of residents downtown. Events such as this contribute to a community's sense of place. With respect to placemaking, comprehensive plans help communities remember their history, particularly the events, attributes, and connections that made their community what it is today. The process should also help identify what community characteristics can be built on to work towards a strong sense of place. Comprehensive plans can identify existing community events, identify new opportunities for collaboration, and locate funding sources to support new events. Looking to the future, comprehensive plans can establish a vision that will guide the evolution of a community's identity over a 10 to 20-year period. Communities can then develop strategies for planning and designing places that are visually interesting and help to tell the story. The image on the right shows a mural in Glens Falls that was funded through the Department of State's DRI. Public art can strongly contribute to a sense of place by accenting community character in a prominent way and creating visual impacts unique to the community. Throughout the course of this presentation, we've explored zoning strategies, many of which preserve and improve existing built environments with a strong sense of place, while establishing guidelines for new construction that contribute to community character. Zoning achieves this through the creation of design standards for elements like landscaping, building facades, building massing, and allowing outdoor dining. Zoning can also creatively allow for public art. Zoning can allow for the adaptive reuse of buildings while simultaneously protecting their historic attributes through the targeted use of historic preservation guidelines. On the right, we see the results of an effort to provide restaurants in Syracuse with functional outdoor space, here utilizing a couple of street parking spots to create a mini park for outdoor seating, creating an engaging and active streetscape. This example from the village of Lancaster provides general positive recommendations or design guidelines for properties within the Lancaster Local Historic District. Design guidelines can ensure high quality of development or restoration and building improvement projects and enhance the broader visual appeal of the community by putting an emphasis on architectural details, creating a cohesive and attractive built environment.
Our last principle is procedural and relevant across the entire planning process. Engage in an inclusive, collaborative public planning process that considers the needs and character of the community. Doing so will drive an accurate and compelling community vision, ensure the community buys into the broader planning effort, which is foundational to successful implementation, and will lead to confident, informed, and cohesive decision-making by elected and appointed officials. In the creation of smart growth comprehensive plans and zoning codes, genuine public engagement is a must. Internal measures include creating a diverse and inclusive steering committee that brings in a wide spectrum of the local community. The steering committee should spend time inventorying hard-to-reach community groups and planning effective methods to incorporate their input, including ways to meet those groups where they are, in addition to making meetings as accessible as possible. Consider things such as meeting times, virtual accessibility, and locations. The steering committee should also spend time identifying prior public engagement strategies in the community and which methods were successful and which methods fell short. In addition to meeting people where they are, the committee should identify and understand barriers such as contentious community issues or lack of trust and adjust accordingly. Leveraging existing efforts and community events can produce positive synergies and boost engagement, especially among people who might not otherwise participate in the planning effort. One often overlooked portion of planning is the needs and concerns of would-be residents who, for instance, would move to the community if there was housing availability. In 2019, the city of Colton, California, a community located 60 miles east of Los Angeles, partnered with the Southern California Association of Governments to develop an area plan for the South Colton neighborhood, an area divided from the rest of the city by the I-10 freeway and an elevated rail line. The city retained a firm called Placeit to conduct a series of interactive public engagement activities to understand how neighborhood residents interacted with their community, how they perceive their community, and how they wish to see their community in the future. Public engagement activities included sensory tours, model building exercises, and other tactile public engagement activities. The end result of the year-long public engagement effort was an area plan that led to tangible community design preferences and a series of recommended zoning changes to achieve the neighborhood's vision. In 1969, Sherry Arnstein described a ladder of citizen participation which categorized a range of public engagement approaches from high to low. The ladder is a helpful guide to understand who has the power when important decisions are being made. Planning processes represent a trust-building exercise between a community and its decision makers. Most planning processes focusing on the soliciting of the opinions of community residents, and in some cases, appointing community members to steering committees to help shape the outcomes of comprehensive planning and zoning processes. Over time, the planning world has moved toward partnering with communities to seek their advice and creative solutions to planning challenges. The results of these interactions eventually become embedded in the final planning documents. When undergoing your community's planning process, please be sure to be aware that control over planning outcomes can be a point of contention, and exercise due care to ensure that public engagement efforts foster a sense of collaboration in the community decision-making space.
Thank you, Danny. That brings this training to a close. Thank you for watching, and don't hesitate to reach out to your DOS project manager if you have any questions. I've also included Danny and I's contact information here if you need to get in touch with us. Thank you, and have a good day.